Today we have J. Marshall Freeman on the podcast, better known to his friends as Jonathan. So J. Marshall Freeman is an author and a graphic designer. His award-winning short stories have appeared in multiple publications, and in December 2020, his young adult fantasy novel, The Dubious Gift of Dragon Blood, was published by Bold Stroke Books. Upcoming work includes a novella in a young adult anthology and a science fiction novel, Cicada Rises from the Earth. He lives in Toronto with his husband and dog, both of whom I know and are awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So I want to figure out, I think with you, how you became an author, because I think for me and a lot of my listeners, writing a book is a bucket list thing. So I would love to know basically how you got into authorship, writing in the beginning, and then later on we'll maybe get into the book publishing process, any tips you might have. But first of all, yeah, how do you answer the question when people ask you, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
Well, since for about the last 5 years, I've said I'm an author when people ask what I do, unless I'm trying to sell them graphic design services, in which case. Yeah. But no, that is my basic answer, is that I am an author, and that's what I'm spending most of my time doing. And now that I have an actual pro-published book, I feel, more confident in saying that.
Right.
And,
this is a very interesting topic because you know my fiance Sarah, and she always has a sort of imposter syndrome like feeling of, I can't say I'm a writer until I'm published. She has been published, I think, in some things published, but she never feels like she can say I am a writer or I am an author. And for you, it sounds like it was the same thing. Before you had a pro publication, would you not tell people that you were an author?
I might say I was an aspiring writer. I would, I believe that if someone is serious about something, you're serious about your writing, meaning you're putting in the hours, you're doing what you can to be a professional. I don't think there's a particular rule to it, but it certainly is different now to say yes, and you can go online or into a bookstore and there's my book, or you can go in front of a public library and take out my book. It definitely has an effect on whatever imposter syndrome was sitting around. I think as far as the world is concerned, you can call yourself whatever you want.
Yeah,
and
right.
Say, no.
Do you think that it ever held you back? Do you think a lack of confidence in your output, so to speak, or your kind of validation from external sources, did that ever hold you back in any way, of not being confident to say, I am this and I can do this? And do you think that ever held you back from any opportunities or any potential, revenue, anything like that?
I think so. I think it took a change. That's one of the reasons, I'm 57 years old, and it was sort of at 50 that I said, okay, time to get serious.
Right.
Because I was already writing. So I think it was more of an internal mental change that said, my voice, what I have to write, I believe it has value and will be of interest to some people. And therefore, I'm now going to stop apologizing for saying, oh, yeah, I write, and also stop saying to myself, well, you're not really writing. So there's sort of a mental flip that has to happen.
Right.
And hopefully that mental flip goes along with some actual activity, because there are people who make the mental flip and I'm a writer. What have you written? I haven't started yet, but
right. Although I guess that kind of optimism can pay off in some ways. But yeah, I think there has to be a healthy mix between external, some kind of feedback that says, yes, this is good and has some sort of value, but also it's an interesting chicken and the egg kind of conundrum of, do I start saying I am this thing, kind of like a fake it till you make it principle, and say, I am this. And then, whatever happens by saying this and by presenting it with confidence, I will put myself out there for other people to give me opportunities or invite me to speak somewhere or give me a commission job or whatever the case may be. By presenting yourself to the world in a certain way, you can create those opportunities. But then, of course, there has to be some substance behind it. Otherwise, then you show up and you got nothing.
Yeah, I guess some people can say, can pretend to be something and try to manifest that. I've always made it a rule never to pretend I'm somewhere professionally that I'm not.
Right.
I'm quite open about about the fact that I'm not with a top publisher at this point. I'm with a small but excellent publisher. And being real about who you are. Not we have a world full of people who are pretending to be celebrities one way or another.
Yeah.
And I guess some people can live with that internal conflict. I can't. So I try to be quite real with where I am, which is why the confidence has grown bit by bit. Okay, look, I won a contest. I feel really good about that.
Right.
So now I say, winner of the so-and-so contest. But I've always made it a policy not to try to pretend to be something I'm not, or be at a level I'm not.
I think that's where I fall to on the spectrum, because there is a lot of wisdom, especially in the entrepreneur world, of fake it till you make it. And, what I'm realizing too, is now that I spend more time in the business, a lot of people who have things like Amazon bestseller attached to their name or winner of this prize, it was very much something that they engineered rather than being recognized by the market or recognized by their peers. They kind of called up the right people. They submitted the application in the right way, and they sort of engineered these results and these accomplishments for themselves in a very systematic and strategic way. And I fall more on the side of you, which is I feel very uncomfortable with saying anything that I can't really, really prove and back up, which I do think holds me back in some ways. I think I can be a little too precious about it, but I think in general, it makes my conscience rest a lot easier. And then I don't feel like I'm constantly.
You're not pretending that there's that OutLoud actually has a production crew of 17 people who are waiting behind the scenes, and that you have a 3 floors in a building downtown.
And exactly, and trying to be as honest about that without shooting myself in the foot and over explaining and over apologizing. So again, this is a very interesting fine line that I constantly find myself trying to navigate. But I would love to, before because I could talk about this all day, but I would love to also get the story of how you got into writing. Like where would you say that began? Have you always been a writer?
I've always made things. From the time I was a kid, I was drawing and writing and picking up movie cameras or whatever I could, and then and music. And then I got into writing fiction in university, and I was sort of serious about it, and then I got more into theater, and then more into music for a long time. And it was more in my 40s that that writing came back in, and I'm not sure why. I think there was always a knowledge of I would do that again, but there's something about writing a 3-minute song where you're doing something that's hooky and whatever, and you can couch the feelings in metaphor and everything. And for me, writing is real. It's pedal to the metal. It's like you have to now put out these words and feel confident and coherent in what you have to say. You have to spend the hours sitting on your ass and writing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for that until I was older.
Right. It's that process of, my mom always said this because she was a writer, and whenever I'd done any kind of writing, essays or whatever creative writing I've done, I think she attributed it to Mark Twain, but writing is the application of the seat of the pants to the ass of the chair. Is that Mark Twain?
I think that sounds right. Yeah. And I think that there's the truth to that. And there's also, I don't think that I didn't have coherent thoughts that I thought were worth putting down. It took me a long time. I remember like in my 30s saying, there's like, I have a feeling that I know what I'm trying to say about something political, about something social, but I can't find the words. I can't argue it. And then that took a long time, and being open to reading a lot of people, reading a lot of authors, but also philosophy and politics, till I started to say, oh, okay, I now actually have things I believe about the world, and things and ways I want to say it. I had to grow up enough.
During those times, though, were you actually putting the thoughts down on paper and not sharing them with anyone, or were you just not writing?
I was doing more things like music.
Right. Because that's another thing I want to ask you about is there's a quote I like to share with clients and particularly with them, I'm talking about, writing blog posts and content creation, getting their thoughts out there so they can position themselves as, this horrible word, thought leader, but, position themselves as kind of experts, or at least a valuable voice in their industry. And if people hear them, they'll want to come work with them because of what they put out there. Okay. And the quote is actually from Ed Sheeran. which I love, which I think is such a great way of putting it. He says that he's talking to songwriters, but it applies to any creative work. Think of yourself like a dirty faucet, like a dirty tap. And when you first open the tap, there's just going to be, dirty water coming out, all the gunk. But then eventually the flow of water clears it out and you get the nice, clean, clear water. But you got to open the tap first and get all the shit out. So he's saying your first few songs are just going to be garbage. That's just the way it is. There's no getting around that. All you are doing is delaying the inevitable, which is delaying the crappy output that you will put out at first.
And it's interesting. There are people who are, I've seen, because I'm part of a writers co-op, which hasn't really met since COVID started. And I watch a lot of new writers, and there's this phenomenon of some people who never can figure out what it means to write. But then there's some people who put out this they bring this crappy short story in, and they get all this feedback, and then they come back and they've jumped from 10% to 80%.
Wow.
And those are obviously people who had somewhere in them the idea of what it means to write and had the talent to do it.
Yeah.
But there's no way of not writing that bad stuff at first.
And if they had submitted that to a publisher without the feedback and without spending the time, it would have been rejected, and they could have made a decision, oh, I'm not a good writer. Well,
everyone gets rejected, and we all feel like we're not good writers sometimes. So everyone's got to get over that one.
Right.
But yes, exactly. But you're even if you have the idea of how to do something, it takes a bit of time to bring that together, and then you get better and better and better as you work.
When you look back at your old writings, do you cringe and go, I can't believe I wrote that? Or do you still feel that, how do you feel about your old work?
I'm pretty forgiving to myself. Old writing, old songs, whatever. I'm pretty good at saying that was okay for where you were.
Yeah, right.
I find it really exciting now that when I write it comes out. But I can much more quickly go from this feeling or this thought into something coherent and concise.
Yeah,
and much easier that is now. But I used to just work at it until it was something, and I can look back and go, it was all right for what it was.
Yeah, because that's it. All you can really do is, especially songwriting. I'm not sure if you feel that book writing is the same, but as a songwriter, I always think about my songs as a snapshot of myself and my life in a moment in time. So just like looking back at old pictures of yourself, you can cringe and go, oh, I can't believe I used to dress like that, or I can't believe I had allowed myself to gain that much weight, or I had that haircut, whatever that feeling is when you look back at old pictures of yourself. Or you can look and go, oh, it's so cool to see me at that time, and to try to remember that, and to just look on it. And, for me, as I get older, I look back on myself with a lot less judgment.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm so much less critical of my earlier, not only creative work or output, but also how I used to dress and how I used to, and I struggle with my weight a lot. I fluctuate a lot, and it usually depends with my mental health and how I'm sort of feeling about myself. And I tend to gain a lot of weight when I'm not feeling so good. So then when you have, like a lot of people, right? And when you have those, that photographic evidence of that, and you look at it and I used to go, brutal. I wish I could just erase that picture. I wish I could delete it forever and have no evidence. But now I look at it and I go, I'm so glad that I can see that and remember myself, and then give myself a little retroactive compassion.
The retroactive compassion, that's a really good word. And there's also, I think, a lot of respect you have to have for where you were in life. There's a spontaneity, because you know this from music, that there's a lot of people who do their best work or their most vital work in their 20s, and then you listen to stuff they do in their 40s and 50s, and they've lost the vitality, which is not necessarily saying it has to happen. And there's a lot of writers who that's not true for, but there's some kind of raw energy, and you can sometimes look back at your old stuff and say, wow, that's technically flawed, but what is it that I'm doing right there that I have to make sure that I don't lose? And I think that partly has to do with, one of the reasons I like writing young adult. It's not the only thing I write, but one of the reasons I like writing it is I have a lot of respect for the energy of youth and for the passion of that time. So I think if we look back on ourselves and we go, oh, what an idiot kid, I think there's a kind of arrogance there that age is the only kind of wisdom.
Right.
There's multiple wisdom. There's a wisdom each age we're at.
Right.
And it'd be nice to be able to look back at your stuff and say, okay, I wouldn't do that now, but I can see the value of it.
Yes. And also just to know that there's a biological thing going on there, which is I'm reading Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep right now, which is so fascinating. And I would recommend to anyone who's listening to this, but he talks about basically what sleep does for our brains and how important it is. But there's a lot about brain maturation and the way that sleep changes the brain. And one of the things is it kind of moves from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. And the front of the brain is where rational decision-making and planning and sort of all that stuff happens. So the sleep is kind of bathing the back of the brain in all of its great, benefits, but it takes the longest in adolescence to get to like the rational decision-making part. So whenever old people are looking at teenagers going, what idiots, they don't know how to make decisions. They don't know how to avoid risky behaviors. That's really just their brains working the way that they work. But
those brains are also passionate, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's, someone who's going to say, I don't care what happens to me. I'm standing in the front lines and fighting for climate change.
Right.
We are going to gather all together and we're going to do this crazy thing and we're going to change the world. And the danger when you get older is you go, oh, you're not really going to change the world.
Yeah, right.
And I want a nap.
Yeah.
That passion of youth is really necessary for the world. And then the experience of age is also really necessary. This also doesn't work when you have a youth culture that says anyone over 30 is lost, or everyone is a okay boomer. It's right. Well, we definitely need both. There's a wisdom to every age we go through, and hopefully, I like to say something is rather than going through our lives, that we hopefully collect our ages and try to keep the passion and wisdom of each of those alive inside of us.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. Instead of trying to leave your 20s, for me, when I turned 30, it was very much, I felt like I was leaving my 20s behind and I couldn't wait because I had a rough decade there. And I was kind of like, man, I made so many bad decisions. I had so many bad experiences and I just want to leave them. But of course now, as I do a bit more work on myself and again, try to exercise some retroactive compassion, I say, a lot of that was necessary for my development. So instead of looking back at it with judgment and shame, you look back on, that's exactly what I needed to do to learn that lesson and to now know from experience what not to do or just even,
and there's also a power, and not just something that, okay, I had to go through that, but I need to play. I need to play in my head. I make worlds. That's what I do. That's my work, is to make worlds the same way I did when I was a little kid, tying a superhero cape, which was a bed sheet around my neck, and actually putting myself in there. This world is the bed. Is this? Yeah. And I've got to have exactly that kind of passion. And now I'm less likely to tie a bed sheet, more likely to just be walking down the street and suddenly I'm going into that world because I got an idea for it. And it's so real to me suddenly. And I can't stay in that state that long, but okay, that was something. And now let's get that down on paper.
Right.
That's a childhood play.
So this is the crux of really why I wanted to talk to you, among other reasons, but is this, let's say, a seemingly polar opposite impulses from an artist and a businessman or business person, right? An artist, by my definition, an artist should be trying to represent themselves as honestly as possible and then find their audience from that to go, this is what I want to say. This is what I want to express. This is personal to me. And then I'm going to share it and hopefully people like it. Mm-hmm. The business person is taught, talk to your customers, talk to your market, find out what they want, and then make it for them. That would be like the Britney Spears or, Justin Bieber approach probably for music. It's like, what do the fans want? Let's make a hit song. It doesn't really matter what it's about. So just put that out there and whatever sounds catchiest will win. But then, you have artists like Tom Waits or Neil Young who are, these are some of my favorites, but there's a million you could name, David Bowie, and who really did their own thing and were quite different and unique and took risks that might not have paid off. But there was something about their authenticity that really captured people's attentions. So when you think about selling your book,
Mhm.
does that affect the actual writing process? Is that just something you think about on the back end of like covers and synopses and stuff like that? How do you think about the actual business of selling your creative work?
All right. There's my temptation is to have kind of a purist answer to that, and that's probably not true. And it's probably not true for the businessman either. It's not one of these. Try to find my hands on the screen. Either or, one
Yes.
of these either or things. It's a continuum, right? Because the person who I know how to make the most beautiful chair, or I think the world needs this idea in order to make loans more equitable or something, and I'm going to make a business based on that. They're not going to just flip over into something exploitative, that person, just because that'll sell better. So even in the business world, so I write poetry too, and when I write poetry, one of the great things about it is no one's gonna, even if I sell this, it's gonna be for $5.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna go anywhere I need to go with that.
Right.
But when I'm writing, a fantasy novel, I'm like, okay, I have to make this entertaining, not because that'll sell better, but because, yeah, I'm writing it's like a pop song. It's like, Tom Waits doesn't write a 17-minute pop song, nor does
Yeah.
Neil Young, right?
Right.
And I don't think it's about, it might be about there's no market for that, but it's also about, yeah, I'm part of this tradition of storytellers, and this is the form, and it's partly the form due to attention or market forces. So I don't think you can separate them.
Right.
At the same time, I think that you have to be brave when you write, and you have to say, this is the book I want to write.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always voices inside you that say, if you didn't include this character, it made it less controversial. In my case, if the characters weren't queer, you would have a bigger market.
Mm.
Or if they say that making a book that's 80,000 words is going to make it easier to sell than if it's 120, so I better just cut all this meat out of the book. You have to say no to those voices if they're interfering with what you're writing. And then just say to yourself, at the end, we're going to look at what I have. And first of all, if a publisher says, no, I have no market for this, the publisher is the great leveler there, and then the market itself.
Yeah.
Right. We believe there's no market for this. We're not buying your book.
Right.
But I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, sorry to cut you off, but I was going to ask, like, have you ever been in a situation where they said, I won't publish that at 120,000 words, but I would at 80,000?
No, which is what I thought might happen with this book, because it is 120.
Right.
And there is a bit of a magical cutoff at 100, where the prices for the expenses kind of shoot up after that.
For printing and formatting and editing and all that stuff. Yeah.
And editing and all of that. There's kind of a magic 100,000. So I'm very grateful that I was able to do a 120,000 word book.
Right.
But there were considerations. The layout person was told, please try to keep it to this many pages, because if it goes, so tighten it up a bit, because if it goes over, we have to put a higher price, and with this unknown author, then there'll be fewer sales. But all these business considerations, I think, going back to your point, have to come after. You have to say, this is what I've got. How is this going to sell? And if someone says this is going to sell better if you do this, then you have to say, oh yeah, I can see that. Or no, that's not the book I'm putting out.
You have to have a very strong internal filtration system for that kind of feedback, I find, because everybody has an opinion. Mm-hmm. And you have to just be really careful about who you listen to and when. I've had so many people tell me different ways of writing my music or producing my music. And sometimes I just have to say, that's not who I am. I just can't put that out there and feel good about it. But that's a good point. And I've had my producer, Jules Lynch, who's a fantastic producer and a fantastic musician and songwriter, but he and I will have these huge battles sometimes. When I produced my last record, he was saying, you got to cut this. And I was saying, no, you need that. And eventually there was one where I just cut the whole intro to my song, because I was like, this doesn't need it. This is just this is self-indulgent noodling on the parts of the musicians. If you just cut it, the song loses 45 seconds of complete fluff, and it's just more impactful. And that's fine. And I don't feel like I'm making a sacrifice there. But then at other times I have to say, no, this is how the song has to be for me to feel like I'm representing myself honestly. And so,
as with
please.
all of these things, both answers are correct.
Yeah.
Anyone who tells you don't write a book about this because that's not what's in fashion. The book's coming out for 3 years. You don't know what's going to be in fashion.
Right.
Same with pop songs. This isn't what's on the pop market now. It's what I'm writing, and the pop market will change if my song is impactful enough or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other case is, though, I self-published a novel, which I've since removed from the market, and I cut 1/3 of the novel out subsequently in my subsequent edit, which I'm now, sending around. And it's a much better book. None of the good stuff has been lost. I was just a younger, more self-indulgent writer. And by younger, I mean 5 years, but I have learned to be more concise. So there's also truth to someone saying, that book doesn't have to be that long. Yes, because it's my vision. And I had enough distance from it to say, that book doesn't have to be that long.
Right.
And it's better, like you cutting off that 45 seconds of noodling.
And I recently went through I'm going through this business accelerator with a bunch of other entrepreneurs called the Key Person of Influence Accelerator. It's a great program, and one of the things they did with us is put us through a publishing challenge where we had to publish 11 articles at a minimum of 500 words each, and for a total of 5,500 words in a certain period of time. It was really fun, and it was a great challenge. We were all kind of helping each other. But what I learned was I saw my numbers written out. My first 3 articles were like 1,500 words and 1,200 words and 1,300 words. And then I was like, and it was taking so much more time. And then I just thought that is a form of self-indulgence. Just stop trying to say everything every time you write a blog post. Just give it a little point. And then I started paring it down a bit more to 700, 600 words. And I read those articles back and I'm like, these are better. Not because, they're dumbed down, but they are just they're more digestible. They're more concise. I had to work harder to say more with less. For me, I'm a very verbose person, both in spoken form and writing. Trying to say less is actually so much more powerful. And those restrictions that either you put on yourself or you can get from other people, like an editor, are really important, not for actually the quality of your message as well.
Yeah. Now, a 500-word article and a 2,500-word article are two different things. If you're going to put a 2,500-word article, I hope you'll spend 6 months on the research and all the interviews. And so that's a very satisfying thing to read a long article in The Atlantic. Yeah. But it's the worst thing in the world to read something that's 2,000 words that should have been 500. Yeah. Yeah. Say, oh, what is the lead? Oh, I finally got to your point 800 words in. Yeah. No. Yeah. The thing about taking advice, I think it's really important to find the people who you trust. I have a little group. I meet one. There's 3 of us who meet once a month to read each other's writing and feedback and give feedback. Trust those people so strongly. First of all, we're respectful of each other. We'll see, rather than saying get rid of this shit. It's like, okay, as I read that, I don't understand why you're spending time on this. Can you explain to me, or either you're missing something or you should cut it, not I know better. But I trust those people when they give me some strong feedback about why something isn't working, or also something I'm not sure about, and they say, yes, that is correct. Right. So everyone in the world has an opinion, but you have to find the small group of people whose opinions are helping you. Yeah. And that you trust are coming from a place of, for me, it's honesty is a big one. I find in the arts world, one thing I love about being in the entrepreneur world is that people are pretty brutally honest very often. There's very much a bottom line thinking of, oh, that's not going to work, and there's a very there's a bluntness to a lot of the communication, because it's like, can you prove this? No. Have you done any research? No. Are those numbers going to add up? No. Okay, fuck it. Cut it. Get it out of here. Which I actually really value as well. But at the same time, with artists, there's almost an oversensitivity to giving feedback. I find in the theater, this is in the acting world, especially,
you can't critique someone's performance because it's just there's too much, it's too personal, it's too subjective, and it becomes crazy. There's like 2 actors that I listen to in the world when they come to see me that I'll listen to and trust what they want to say.
Well, yeah, because the quality of art is directly proportional to how much of yourself you are putting out there.
Right.
How brave you are being about putting yourself out there. These are my feelings. These are my ideas. This is what this is the most beautiful, the most sensitive, and the most dangerous parts of myself, which is another reason I didn't really get going to my 50s. I wasn't brave enough to put myself out in the world. So yeah, when you critique someone, you have to, in the arts, you have to say, I'm critiquing the things that matter to you the most.
Yeah. Right.
And that's a dangerous, it's something you have to just be aware of when you talk to people.
As someone giving feedback.
As someone giving feedback, yeah.
For sure.
If you're just an asshole as a critic, like especially in a place where, like in my writers group, if people came into the larger writers group and they're just brutal, yeah, why should I? Why there goes my bravery to reveal that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think business people, entrepreneurs can learn so much from that, because I believe that I think some people think that we're becoming faker with social media and with the information age, and like everything, I think there's both things are true at the same time. I do think there is a lot more fronting and putting on airs of being more successful or cooler or whatever than you really are. But I also think that there is a thirst for authenticity that actually does come through a lot of social media channels, which does not come from mainstream television and publications, which tends to be a bit more old school and everything has to be polished. And there are people out there who share themselves quite honestly through YouTube videos or through Twitter, and they're able to say something real and true and be themselves through this medium. And
it's safer because there's less money at stake.
Yes.
If you have a big television production, there's going to be layers of producers and advertisers who are saying, I don't know if you should go that way, but if I just have to put up a YouTube video.
Yeah, then you can say whatever you want, really. I mean, obviously, YouTube has rules and there's certain things you can't talk about or you get demonetized.
Old YouTube.
Yes, right. But in general, what I notice is that there's a lot of people who are becoming wildly successful. We're talking creating $1 million empires through just being themselves. They have a craft of filmmaking or whatever it is. They have a craft of writing, but it's because they're able to share who they are. And the people who really love them, who tune in every week, who buy their products or comment on their videos or share their videos and help drive the engine of revenue that is created from this endeavor, they feel so strongly about this person because they really feel like they're getting to know them and that person is being honest with them and showing who they are. And I think a lot more entrepreneurs would do well to harness that artistic mindset, especially when we're talking about content creation. So if you have a security company, but you put out videos talking about the feelings of insecurity when you don't have a good security system, or how scary it is to get broken into, or how awful it is to live in a bad neighborhood with your kids and not feel, and they're able to tell you stories about their own experiences. That is so powerful as a way to grow your business, because you're putting yourself out there.
Yes.
And people will, like the David Bowies and the Tom Waits, people will love
people
that.
Respond to honesty. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And they respond. Yeah. People who put their defenses down.
And so how do you access that bravery? What are the things that you had to do you said you weren't brave enough. So how did you become brave enough to share yourself?
Pause. Yeah. Part of it is just not giving a shit. It's like, I have a bit of the everyone in the world to like me. And the danger of this of one person out there not liking me seemed to weighed on me too much before, and now it's like I'm not out to pick a fight, but I'm out there to say this is what I believe. Yeah, it's having the confidence in what I believe. It's having the confidence that saying it helps people, and knowing that I'll survive people saying they don't like it.
Yeah.
So that helped. Yeah. And having a sense of urgency about issues I care about, and seeing other brave people and saying, okay, other people can be brave. I guess I can be too, because I believe passionately enough in what I'm doing.
Yeah, the one thing you said that really stuck out to me was being confident that it will help people. Because I think that's a big one that I struggle with, and a lot of people struggle with, is this question of, who the hell am I to say what I'm going through and put that out there? Am I just asking for attention? Is it a cynical move that I'm just using am I trying to use a sob story? Am I just contributing to the noise out there of people going, this is my life on social media? But then to shake those voices off and say, the more honest I can be about what I struggle with and what I'm going through and what I think about and what I care about, and trying to put that into one thing you said, coherent thoughts that are worth writing down. Once you can find that, then you stop worrying about those voices and go, so what if somebody sees it and goes, oh, shut your mouth, you idiot. So what if a bunch of people come across your video or your book or whatever and say, oh, this is just another thing in a sea of noise. The people who do find it,
or worse, that they think this is harmful what you're doing.
Right. Yes.
You shouldn't be talking about youth sexuality in my book, and consent things. And people say, I don't think it's right to talk about youth and sexuality at all. I think that you're an evil person.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, and I have to believe that what I'm doing, I'm putting there the way I did it because I believe it's going to help people. And it's
then
honest.
You see a show like Big Mouth, which is one of the most popular series on Netflix, and it's just, that's their entire theme. But yeah, I mean, so that's really interesting. How much controversy have you had to deal with in terms of people, like, not just like, not liking what you said, but really disliking it to the point where they have to come out and say, you should stop doing this. You're a bad person. This is bad stuff.
Zero, because I'm not on anyone's radar enough for that yet.
Right.
That'll be not pleasant, but it'll be a mark of success.
Yes, right.
And I've spent far too much time, because I'm on Twitter all the time, and I've spent far too much time worrying about Twitter mobs, because someone doesn't like what you do and it turns into, and I finally gotten over that fear, because I realized that Twitter thinks it's more important in the world than it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I mean, the idea of a mob, I think, cancel culture scares a lot of creators. They don't want to be canceled, and they don't want to say anything that's too bold or political, or really go out on a limb and say what they believe. But then you kind of think, first of all, nobody cares about you in general, like, unless you're really, really famous. And even then, it's like, and all those, I think a lot of those stories about Twitter is angry at this person for saying that, it's just exaggerated by blogs to try to have a story about something when there's a slow news cycle, right?
And also by people who spend their whole life inside a bubble. One of my favorite YouTubers is a woman named Natalie Wynn, ContraPoints.
Mm-hmm.
And ContraPoints did a great video leading up to the American election, having talked to a lot of her followers who were saying, I won't vote in this. It doesn't make a difference whether it's Biden or Trump. They're both corrupt. And, and what we need is communism now. And she did this great video just answering all the points. And there was this place where she got to and say, you have no idea how small your bubble is that you're living in. Yeah. She said, I was sure that Bernie Sanders was going to get the nomination because everybody in my timeline said it was.
Yeah.
And then, then you talk about communist Twitter, and then smaller and smaller points. And because you're talking to each other, you think that this world, and that was actually a huge relief to me, because even if someone said something nasty about me and 50 people retweeted that, it would feel huge. But it would really be very, very small thing in the scheme of the world,
Absolutely. And then but that's the other problem that we have is human beings have a negativity bias. Because evolutionarily speaking, things that were negative and made us feel negative emotions were more important in the short term for survival. So if you look at a beautiful panoramic view and you see some apples and you see a stream of water, but then there's a bear, the apples and the stream of water just go, that doesn't matter. I need to fucking focus on this bear right now, so I get out of here alive. And that happens now with negative comments online. This happened to me the other day too. I did a webinar for like I think 100 people or something. It was for an entrepreneur group, and they had a poll at the end to say, how did the guest speaker do? And all these, it was like excellent, good, fair, poor, or something. And all these results were coming in. It was like, excellent, excellent, excellent. I was like, yeah, I did it. And then a couple people started saying good. And I was like, what? How dare you? How dare you say good? And I was furious, like momentarily. And then I thought, what a ridiculous thing. And I think at the end, it was like 75% excellent, 25% good, 0 anything else. That should have been a major victory. But the rest of the day, I was like, oh, fucking, well, why good? What could I have done better? What do they know? Maybe they were overly critical. I was fuming about this thing for like a good hour. And then I just sort of reminded myself about this tendency towards noticing negativity. But that is,
I think also we have our own inside ourselves. We have a voice that's that says you're no good, or it'll all be revealed what a fraud you are.
Yeah.
And so we're actually out there looking for the evidence.
Right.
They good, not excellent.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there it is. I'm
there. It
found
is
out.
the proof. Yeah.
So before we go, I really want to get into your book and the substance of your book. So it's called The Dubious Gift of Dragon Blood. And what is it about?
The Dubious Gift of Dragon Blood is about a Toronto youth named Crispin Haugen, who is dealing with a lot of different identities. He's mixed race, he's gay, he's got all these different things, and who am I, and all this. And then he finds out that he also carries the blood of dragons in his vein, and that there has been a prophecy that in the realm of fire, one of the 5 dragons is going to die, and he may be asked to come there and be the dragon groom and sire another dragon, which is quite a surprise to a gay 16-year-old. So he goes off to the realm of fire, and where many adventures happen, and there's a war, and he falls in love, and lots of things happen. But one of the main things about the book is you have these different labels, these different categories you fit into. Is that really who you are? But you still have to find out who you are as a person.
Right.
And part of the way I do that is it's not brain freeze. What is that called? He's not the one. He is not the prince of Narnia or the person who's discovered, or Neo in the Matrix, that the whole world is waiting for him. No, he's a person who's playing his part in it. And what his quest is, other than to help, is to find out who he is amid all these labels and tasks that have been sent to him, and find out what it means to be Crispin.
Right.
So it's kind of, it goes against some of the fantasy tropes in that way.
Right. Yeah. There with the classical fantasy, like, Frodo being the only one who can carry the ring, or Harry Potter being the only one who.
Actually, I would say more Aragorn, hiding out as turning out to actually be the lost king of Gondor. Right. In a way, Frodo is more like Crispin, because he's like, okay, someone's got to carry the ring, and here I am, and it aligns with my beliefs that I'm going to do it. So he's actually a similar kind of character. He wasn't.
Interesting, yeah.
He has this weight of history, but he isn't. The history hasn't been waiting for him.
Right, and so I guess that for a lot of young people too, that could be a huge weight off their shoulders to read a story like this, especially because I remember with Harry Potter in particular, I grew up with Harry Potter. I was 10 when I read the first book. He's 10 when the series starts. I was actually convinced on my 11th birthday that I was going to get an owl from Hogwarts, and Hagrid was going to come and tell me I was a wizard. When it didn't happen, I had a really shitty 11th birthday, because I was like, this is bullshit. I'm not a wizard. What's the point of living? But there was this huge thing of being like, I'm not special enough. And I need to be this like big person. I need to like have this massive impact on the world. Otherwise my life has been a waste.
Right.
And so what I really like about what you're saying is that it's kind of a thing just to say, you're not the one, and you don't have to be the one. You can just be a one. And
everyone is important. He is playing a really important role, the things he does, and he's trying to do the right thing, but he is one of many people trying to do the right thing to make the other. That's what I'm, I don't want Elon Musk to save us by taking us to Mars.
Yeah.
That's because bullshit, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
What I want is a world where we're all taking responsibility and working collectively to fix this world we're in, to make just good world. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's that, you don't have to be a savior. You can make your contribution and figure out what the right thing is to do and the right thing for you and who you are. And once you find that little slice of the universe that you can take care of, things get so much easier. You know, and again, when it comes back to writing and when it comes back to being an entrepreneur, you think about, okay, what's my stamp on the world? But then there's this tendency is it's got to be huge. And then if you don't hit that huge thing, you kind of get discouraged and it can seem overwhelming. But if you just go, I'm just going to try to accomplish this thing. I just want to do this. And then actually you end up accomplishing more because you take the weight of this massive earth-shattering accomplishment off your shoulders and just go, I just have to make a video today, or I just got to find one new client today, or I just got to do this. And you know, you break it down and say it doesn't have to change. If I start out trying to change the world, I may never get there and then I'll feel like a failure. But if I start trying to change my street, you know, maybe I can do that. And then the neighborhood and then the city and so on. While Jonathan is going to get his book, the idea of writing a book is something that scares a lot of entrepreneurs. It's something that I'm working on this year. And as I'm writing this book, I'm going to be publishing content about the process of writing and publishing a book for entrepreneurs. So definitely stay tuned for that, because I have a rough outline of my book. Again, this is through my business accelerator, KPI, that's helping me do this. So I'm trying to take my book from outline to published, and I'll be posting a lot about that. I was just giving a quick little plug to some content I'm going to be putting out.
Okay, that's better than just cutting away.
Here, yeah, let's see the book.
I probably would be happy if I didn't do that. Unhappy.
Dubious Gift of Dragon Blood. Oh, that's awesome. I really like that cover too.
Thank you. Actually, I did the cover, which is very unusual for a writer to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But it worked out.
So before we go, I also want to ask you about your opinion about story structure, because I teach this a lot in my courses. I teach the hero's journey and the 3-act structure. So I'd love to hear how much you lean on that, if that's something that you think about at all. Like, what do you think about the hero's journey and that kind of that, especially with fantasy, it's a very I
never I never go and check in where I am with that. It tends to work out that way.
Right.
It's the same, like screenwriters will say, no, I don't always write the 3 acts, but I find out that I've written the 3 acts. Yeah. So it's the same. Yeah. It's a pretty classical portal fantasy, in the sense that, you know, he starts on Earth and then he finds out he has this mission, and then he goes to the place and he learns things about himself and then comes back to Earth. That's the classic portal fantasy.
Yeah.
But I don't ever write. I guess I've just internalized enough story.
Right.
That's what happens. Yeah.
To understand the basics of structure. Because I teach a very condensed version, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I teach entrepreneurs to go, okay, if you should always be telling a story pretty much when you're pitching, or when you're giving a presentation to your team, or when you're putting out content. And I basically I superimpose 3 parts of the hero's journey onto the 3-act structure. And so the first act is, I call it the ordinary world and the call to adventure. So it's set up some kind of thing for people. So it could be like, this is your world. If you're talking to your target market, if it's an ad or some kind of content, you say, this is your life right now. And it's ordinary in this way, but then you have this problem, and that's kind of the call to adventure. Then act 2 is the special world. You can try this thing. And then if you try this thing, then this happens. And then this problem might arise. And then this problem might arise. Now, act 3 is the elixir, the prize. And then which is basically like a new and better you, or a new and better life, if you kind of use my product, or if you buy my services, or even if you just sort of do this solution that I'm offering to you. In my mind, that structure is just a kind of a fail-safe of just creating content, because you know that people are primed to take in story of this way. What do you think about that? Do you think that's oversimplistic? Do you think that's a good way of doing it? Like, I would love to hear your feedback on that.
That sounds like a way to do it, especially if it's a product or service that people don't know. Then by putting it into a story structure, you're giving them a hook. You're giving them a way into that. Yeah, and now I don't know how this would apply, but with when I'm dealing with story structure, it's not enough for me to, oh look, you've done a rip-roaring adventure. That's not that interesting to me. there has to be an overriding emotional reason to write it. I'm more interested in the characters and what they go through and how they change as people. Right. And the story, which I try to make as entertaining as possible, is a vehicle for that. Right. Any scene I write, it's not enough to say, okay, how did this move the story forward? It's also how did it move the character arc forward?
Right. And that's what people, I think that's what people really love to read about, right? In general, is people going through something, right? Like there's a reason there are no movies where it's just about the fall of Troy, but it's about the characters who are present during the fall of Troy and what's happening to their loved ones and their friends and their family members and stuff. It's not just there was a big battle, there's a bunch of nameless, faceless soldiers, they have a fight, and then the Trojans, whatever. You know, it has to be about individuals. Like you have to make the specific to appeal universally.
And the larger the story is, the more true that is.
Right.
What I'd say, for instance, movies and stories about the Holocaust, the bigger the panorama is, I think the less powerful it is, and the more you focused on, and this is what happened to this one family.
Yeah, right. And that
gives you the size of it. Yeah.
I think that's incredibly applicable for entrepreneurs, because it's like when you're telling your stories, when you're putting content out there or giving a presentation or your pitch, if you tell a story about one of your customers, or if you tell a story about yourself, then all of a sudden there is a big market for this, but here's how it affects people on a human level. This is why 1,000 families like Sophia's will benefit from this. And this is why people will really get behind this product, because it changes their lives emotionally for the better. And, you know, people forget that we're emotional creatures. We think we're logical, but the emotional brain is in the driver's seat most of the time. Yeah. All right, Jonathan, I'll end there today to be respectful of your time. I can't thank you enough for doing this. This was such a great conversation. I think it's really, really valuable. And I'm so glad we were able to do this.
And I will see you in Dog Park.
I'll see you in the dog park. All right. Take care, Jonathan.
Cheers.
Bye.